I just want to put it out there that for a married couple who's remarried, this is a blended family, not blended very well. Okay, but they're related now, right? They have an extra responsibility to make sure everyone's treated fairly. And I hope that everyone who's in a blended family, whether you're the parents, whether you're the adult children, if you're in a blended family, there are some conversations that need to be had, and they may not be comfortable.
Did you plan for this, or did you miss when life demands answers you can't dismiss? Will you be ready when the trumpet blows? Do you have the blueprint for life's unknowns?
Gerald and Edna, both in their early 90s, lived in a small, quiet town. They had spent almost 50 years together, sharing laughter, sorrow, and a lifetime of memories. Having raised 3 children, Gerald's kids, Mark and Susan, Edna's kid, Rachel, they thought they had covered all the bases for their family's future. However, like many, they did not have an estate plan. One autumn morning, while preparing for their weekly outing to the local farmer's market, tragedy struck. Both Gerald and Edna collapsed in their living room, victims of a gas leak that had gone undetected. The accident was swift and unforeseen, leaving no time for goodbyes or preparation. Their bodies were found days later because a neighbor noticed their trash cans had not gone out, and deliveries had piled up at their door. Gerald's children, Mark and Susan, were devastated by the news. They rushed to their dad's home, finding the once vibrant house filled with the echoes of lives just ended. Amidst their grief, they began searching for any paperwork that might indicate their parents' wishes regarding their estate. As they rummaged through drawers and searched under beds, hope faded. The couple had discussed their assets in passing, but had never formalized any estate plan. Many weeks after the death, Susan called Rachel to let her know her mom had died. Rachel, after recovering her composure, asked how she could help, and Susan informed her that Mark and Susan cleared out the home and saved a few of her mother's things for her. Rachel was shocked and resentful that she had not been invited to see the home for herself, to select what she wanted of her mother's. Rachel had not been close to her mother in the last few years, and they had not spoken by phone since the last holiday season. Susan explained that due to the condition of the bodies, there would be a cremation for them both, but no funeral, as there were no instructions for this and no funds. Rachel thanked Susan for the news and gave her address so Susan could ship the items she promised. Rachel did not expect to hear from Susan again. Rachel had received a small package from Susan a couple weeks after the phone call. The package had 2 necklaces, some cards Rachel had mailed to her mother, and a yellowed christening dress, which Rachel recognized as her mother's. Mark's attorney mentioned the Simultaneous Death Act. Under this law, both Gerald and Edna were considered to have died at the same time, due to the circumstances of their deaths. The attorney said that a probate would need to be opened so that Gerald and Edna's assets could be distributed to their children. Mark offered himself as the probate administrator since he lived closest to his dad's house. Mark told the attorney about Susan, but did not mention Rachel. Notice of the deaths was posted in the local paper, as was notice of the probate. Months later, Rachel Googled her mom's name on a whim and found that a court hearing had happened. Rachel called a friend who suggested that Rachel find an attorney.
Marguerite, there's so much to unpack there, to just take it one step at a time for the audience. They've been married 50 years. The son had an attorney. Why, in your experience of being a professional trustee and having worked in so many of these cases, do you find this so common?
Well, the commonality is that a lot of people don't do their estate plan because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to talk about. It's uncomfortable to admit that we're mortal. It's awkward to have conversations about money. In terms of our culture and the way that we talk about things, it's much easier to talk about your favorite kind of makeup or a television show that you like than it is to actually talk about what you think you might want as you age. And of course, in this case, these 2 people, they were in their 90s. They're in their 90s and had no estate plan. So it leads me to wonder, it's like, so how old do you need to be to have an estate plan, to consider that someday this all might be over and your instructions will be needed?
I mean, we don't know their net worth, we don't know their assets, but have children. It's obviously a second marriage. Do you find in your experience that you think they were just ignoring the fact, or were they not aware of what the proper thing to do is to avoid this kind of situation?
I think a lot of people assume that if they just tell their family, this is all yours, that's enough. But unfortunately, in the law, and we can see in this particular example, and it almost doesn't matter what state you're in, even though the laws, the probate code that governs the things we're talking about, and probate is the court procedure where ownership is transferred from the deceased person to someone else based on the court's wisdom. A lot of statute, that's the rules that are actually written in the probate code, will point to blood-related people should get your stuff if you don't have a plan. It's not really the government that gets your money in a probate, but the money that the government gets is those court fees, and then there's the attorney fees, and then there's other filing and other things that need to happen, and it takes a long time. So Mark offered himself as the probate administrator. It might be something else in your state. But the idea is that he's offered himself to be the person who's responsible for gathering all of the data, all of the assets, and bringing to the court a report as to what there is. And then the court gets to think about it and decide who gets what. Well, isn't that interesting that Mark didn't even mention his stepsister?
Let's dive into Rachel, because I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people in the audience. They are maybe not, they don't live in the city where their parents live. They are a stepchild, or again, the second marriage situation. If you were a friend of Rachel's, given your incredible expertise in this space of estate planning, what would you immediately advise Rachel to do?
Well, I'm with her friend. I think Rachel needs an attorney. She probably needs an attorney who's actually licensed in the same jurisdiction as where the probate is happening. And hopefully Rachel has discovered this inappropriate approach to devising Gerald and Edna's stuff, because there might not be anything left. By the time that Rachel's attorney reaches out to Mark's attorney, and by the way, Rachel's attorney would actually look at the court documents, see the case number, see the decisions made, and so on, write a letter explaining the relationship. The attorney might actually request also Rachel's birth certificate, for instance. Let's tie Rachel exactly to this person. Had Mark been a professional trustee, he might have asked his attorney if there are any other relatives or anyone else who might be heirs at law in terms of this particular case.
Isn't that a legal requirement to notify, to put out that notification to all those who may be a party to this probate?
It is. And so what might end up happening is that once the attorney for Rachel dives into this particular matter, Mark might be held for a breach of fiduciary duty. Whether Mark likes it or not, whether Susan likes it or not, Rachel is a party to this particular case and should have received proper notice. And if money has already been distributed and so on, and Mark and Susan already received the money, it's very likely that a judge is going to ask them to give that money back or to pay Rachel some portion of what's owed. Because here's the other thing a lot of couples don't do. Now, we're talking about a second marriage. We're talking about people that got married, remarried 50 years ago. Okay?
Long term,
right? So that would have been 1975. Given that we're recording this in 2025. So at that point in time, it's very likely that Rachel's mom, Edna, had some assets. Maybe it's from her previous marriage. Maybe Rachel's father is deceased, and maybe mom inherited some kind of money from an insurance policy or had a pension or something. We don't really know very much about Edna's life before she married Gerald. But let's say, for argument's sake, maybe Rachel was a 10-year-old girl. Let's say that Edna had Rachel when she was 30 years old. Okay. So now as a 10-year-old, Rachel's in the wedding photos, right? Rachel's there. Maybe she even lived with them because she'd be going to school. It's also possible that Gerald might be a little older than Edna, and maybe he was closer to 35 or 40 when they got married. And so I'm guessing here with this story, but the idea is think about yourself. Think about yourself at that age. You might not have had very much, but if you'd been married before, you might have something. And that something becomes community property between you and your spouse unless you keep it separate. That's a really important thing for people that are contemplating divorce or have been divorced or are thinking about getting married again. If it's really important to you that your kids get your stuff, you've got to have an estate plan to do that.
Sole and separate. Keep it separate.
Right. Like have a separate bank account. Like have something that is yours on your Social Security number that you keep that way. Because every time you put money into the mutual account, that now becomes part of the community assets.
So in your career as a professional trustee, have you seen 3 trusts? I mean, his, hers, and their joint trust?
That's a really good question. For myself personally, I have 2 trusts. I married the best guy, and we're so happy together. And we've been together for more than 15 years. He's got 4 boys. I've got 2. So we have a family with 6 sons. And it was really important to me that as we fell in love, as we decided to live this life together, as we decided to get married, and we lived together for a long time before getting married, because why would I want to do that again?
But you did.
But I did. I found someone I could actually trust. I found someone that I could really be partners with, who understood child raising, right? So we had a lot of experiences in common. We also had very different experiences. And I want to share that I have had my own trust since my boys were 8 and 9 years old. You know, I knew that at some point in time, I might find someone to love, but raising my kids, I was on my own. And I had these little boys, and I started this new career as a fiduciary. We actually lived in a trailer on my mom's property for 2.5 years while I figured out how to do this work and shadowed her to all her meetings and stuff. And there are my kids having a Huck Finn kind of experience, toads in their pockets, you know, fresh fruit off the trees. And I had this moment where I realized I couldn't be the best fiduciary possible unless I had my own estate plan. So I asked my mom for some suggestions. She had been a fiduciary for many years by then, and I'm her apprentice, right? So I make an arrangement with an attorney. I don't have enough money to pay for the whole estate plan. But I'm sharing this because it was really hard. It was really hard. I had big feelings. I cried. I had that view of all the milestones I would miss if I died early. I bought term life insurance so there would be enough to pay legal fees so that my kids could remain free and happy and healthy even after my death. And it all worked out. I gave the attorney small monthly payments. I got my finished estate plan. So I've had one for a while. But then as I bought shares of our practice, those shares are owned by my trust.
So you have your trust. And your husband has
we have a mutual trust.
You have a mutual trust.
So the house we bought together, the mutual account we have together to pay for all the household expenses that I contribute to for my paycheck every week, all of that we have as a mutual trust. So I have 2 separate trusts. I have one that's a separate property trust that's mine, of the things that I have built. And then we have one together that holds our trust in our bank account.
So where I'm going with this is a learning tool for the audience to understand that it doesn't have to be the Mr. and Mrs. Jones family trust. Well, it can be, obviously.
Sure.
But you can also see the Mary Jones trust if she's coming into a second marriage or coming into a second relationship that she has sole and separate property that she wants to maintain.
Right. Anyone who's going through a divorce You really need to talk to your divorce attorney about a reference to an estate planning attorney. They don't do the same jobs. They don't have the same focus. But as your divorce is winding down, and even before you get the decree, you can actually get your estate plan documents done professionally. And that way you have someone in your corner, because here's one of the things that ends up happening for a lot of people. They don't go back to their life insurance policy and update the life insurance policy. They don't go back and make sure the beneficiary on their bank account isn't their ex. It's really a painful thing to go through a divorce. It's really hard. And now we're looking at a couple, Gerald and Edna.
Let's go back. Yeah, let's go. I want to go back to Gerald and Edna.
Yeah, let's talk about them for a minute. They found each other. They got married. They clearly, by their activities and stuff, they do things together. They're happy. And I have no idea what their pre-marriage assets looked like, but let's assume after 50 years, they've combined everything. Well, it doesn't look like they ever really combined the children, right? It doesn't look like Mark and Susan, who might have been adults by the time Gerald remarried. It's possible. And they weren't in the house to grow up with Rachel. They may have always resented the second marriage. And some of those feelings are playing out here 50 years later. 50 years later. So as we're living our lives, we may not realize this decision, how it's going to play in such a long time from now. But we can see it here.
Well, let's be proactive with Gerald and Edna and help the audience understand what should they, if this hit home with anybody in our audience, oh my God, we've been married a long time. We really don't have, we may have done the estate plan even 20 years ago if they have that, or they've done nothing. Certainly on these assets within the home, the personal property, what's step one?
Gosh. Okay, step one is just make the appointment with an attorney, but not any attorney. Finding the right attorney is its own thing. And we're going to have some stuff for you on our website, planforthis.com, so that you're able to locate and find the right attorney for you and ask great interview questions. So if you're really at that place where you don't know where to begin to get your estate plan, come visit the website, planforthis.com. We've got some great stuff for you.
Or if you're Rachel, if you're somebody who you can relate to Rachel, subscribe to Plan for This so you can get more information on how to be proactive with your stepfather and your mother, or mother, whichever way it goes.
Yeah. Here's one thing about the personal property. When someone passes away, now their house, their personal effects, every drawer, under the bed, in the closet, everything will be opened. Everything. If you didn't organize it, if you didn't set all your bank statements in one place so that your successor, the next logical person that would show up at your house can find them, they're going to look through everything to find everything that's needed. What is needed? Every piece of paper you've ever signed, any accounts that you have open of any kind of coins, jewelry, anything of value in the house. You might have collected something. So this becomes a very big topic. But getting down to that first step, if you have anything specific that you want someone to have, give it to them. Give it to them while you're alive, and you can enjoy their receipt of it. You can tell them the story about it. You can have a party at your house and give away stuff if you want to. I know that sounds weird. If you're enjoying those things, don't give them away, but write it down somewhere. I'm not here to give legal advice. I'm here to be a cheerleader so that you get your legal act together.
Let's talk about the Simultaneous Death Act. That was totally new to me. Tell us about that. Well,
again, I have just a little bit of information about that. And that is that the idea is if you have someone who passes away in close proximity to the other person. So let's look at the Gene Hackman story. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa were married for a long, long time. She was 30 years younger than Gene. And I think the presumption might have been, oh, well, Gene's going to die first. But what we've discovered in terms of the investigation is that Betsy actually died first. She was 65 years old. And because of her death, Gene, who had full dementia, that means he was physically able, right? Walking around, tall and strong as we expect Gene Hackman to be, but not able to take care of himself, really dependent on Betsy. And she died, and he was alone in that house with her body for a week. The dog was in the crate, died in the crate because Gene didn't think to open it. And I don't blame Gene for that, right? His mind is gone. His body is there. So can you imagine that poor gentleman walking around the house, not knowing where she is, not grokking, not understanding what's happening? And so in terms of their matter, since it was discovered that Betsy died first, it's only a week difference. Now, I don't know what their estate plan says. We know that Mr. Hackman had a will, because the will is the one document that becomes public, and the rest of it is kept private, unless there's disputes and so on, and then some of that might get revealed in the future. But what we do know is he wasn't getting regular phone calls from family. He wasn't getting regular visits from other people. Betsy probably figured out that she had it handled. She decided that she didn't need any help. So they didn't have any kind of daily check-in call. So the discovery of their death came because a neighbor noticed something was off, or a delivery man noticed something was off. But that's not your people. That's not the people who love you or care about you, or someone you've arranged for professionally to work with. So that's a caution to me that, all by myself doesn't really operate once we're dealing with somebody who's 95 years old.
So this is Simultaneous Death Act, again, considers if you die within a couple of weeks of one another, that it's a simultaneous death?
Yes. So let's say Gene Hackman died first. Well, that would mean that Betsy would inherit everything based on the will that was discovered. And that might have been okay 30 years ago, but maybe it's not okay now. Maybe Gene needed to think about and maybe provide for his kids in some way. So the point is with the Simultaneous Death Act is that rather than trying to figure out who died first, because in this case now Betsy died first, so does that mean all of Betsy's stuff goes to Gene? So imagine from an administrative standpoint, what does the trustee do? Well, they have to gather up all the assets. Then they have to transfer those assets through distribution to the right party. And then what does that trustee who receives all of that do? Well, would it be the same trustee for both Mr. Hackman and his wife? Maybe. So the Simultaneous Death Act allows us to treat it as if it's all one estate. And now hopefully the administration is not double effort. It's just one effort to get everything sorted out and everything to where it's supposed to go. And hopefully they had a thorough list of their personal property. Can you imagine the awards and the other memorabilia that someone like Gene Hackman might have in his home? And not to mention their value, right? And so because he hasn't devised who gets what, now that all has to be sorted out. Maybe. Again, we didn't see his trust document. So for Gerald and Edna, what we know about them is they have no estate plan.
No estate plan.
Right? So that means that if the court was made aware that there were 3 children for this long-term marriage, it would have been very likely that the court would have said, oh, this gets split 3 ways. And the way it's been done, because of Mark's dishonesty, that it's only split 2 ways.
And Mark may not think he's being dishonest. He just thinks this is what I'm doing. I mean, you get that mindset of the son taking charge, or do you think he's?
I'm sorry. This couple's been together 50 years. Like it or not, you've been known about Rachel and her existence and her importance to your stepmother. Oh, you don't like that term. You just call Edna Edna because you don't like calling her mom. I understand that. But at the same time, there are some realities. If you have an inkling, an idea that your parents might have named you as trustee, it might be good for you to have a conversation with them about what their expectations are. Because here's the thing about Mark's job as the administrator. Is Mark supposed to be serving himself? Is he supposed to put himself and Susan first? No. He has a fiduciary role. That means that he has to put Gerald and Edna first. He doesn't have to like Edna. but she still has to come first along with his dad.
And he has to report to Rachel.
He does. He does. He has to keep her informed. She's supposed to have received notice. I mean, a rug has been totally pulled out from under Rachel in this story, and it's not appropriate and it's not okay. And it's very possible that Mark will be sued by Rachel, and he may have to give up everything that he got because of his dishonesty.
So in terms of moving forward, can Mark we can't really undo it unless there's legal. If Rachel just doesn't do legal action, it's gone.
It's gone. And it could be, he could have spent it all by now. We don't know. But I just want to put it out there that for a married couple who's remarried, this is a blended family, not blended very well. Okay. But they're related now, right? They have an extra responsibility to make sure everyone's treated fairly. And I hope that everyone who's in a blended family, whether you're the parents, whether you're the adult children, if you're in a blended family, there are some conversations that need to be had, and they may not be comfortable.
Let's take if Rachel were deceased but had children, would her children be entitled to as much right as Rachel? Maybe.
And again, that has to do with the probate code in the state that you live in. It also has to do with, are they going to show up? Has Mark been made aware that there are Rachel's children? And also because there's no estate plan from Gerald and Edna, and maybe no contact information for those kids, they also might get left out. So do they have a right? Yes, I think they do. In my opinion, I think they do. But to actually get there from here, that's why we have to have an estate plan. Look, we're in a system. The system we're in gives us tools so that we can devise and decide how things are going to go.
If there was a court-appointed professional trustee, would that professional trustee's role, one of their roles, be to then try to find out who grandchildren, cousins, uncles, aunts?
Sure. So let's say for a moment that we have a professional trustee that gets in here before Mark and Susan get to the house, right? Let's say there has been an estate plan, and Gerald and Edna named a fiduciary in their area. They had a note on their refrigerator, or they had informed their neighbors, if anything happens to us, call this professional. Something happened to them. The professional was called. The locks get changed on the house. There is an assessment and an inventory done of everything that's in the house. Every piece of paper, anything with a number or a name on it, is gathered from the house and sorted through. What are these? Oh, look, we have Rachel's report cards. Who's Rachel? We've got memorabilia. We've got photos and stuff. We're starting to piece it together and figure it out. Maybe we find an address book. Maybe we're able to get into the computer and actually see who their contacts are. And since we're getting more and more electronic, I just want to say that the generation before that got mail, that hand wrote letters, that generation's dying off, and everything in your life might be in this device. That's very possible. And the problem with that is who's going to get in to find it? How are we going to know? So I may actually ask my attorney to do a search. If I think that there might be relatives that it's not clear here from the material that I have, I might do an heir search. That's paying a company that actually looks through public records, maybe starts with Gerald and Edna's birth certificates, their marriage certificate, and then they start figuring out who these nice people are related to. And that's really how we have discovered certain relatives, where some relatives told us, oh, we're the only kids. I mean, I've heard that from somebody, and I said, oh, why would you say it that way?
No, you're not.
So figure that not only am I a fiduciary, but sometimes I'm an investigator, right? And I've got to figure it out and I've got to think about it. But that also means no distributions are made. That might also mean that I put all the personal property in storage until I figure out who gets it. There are expenses for that, but that's part of what the estate and the trust pays for.
So if Mark were to call you, let's say Edna and Gerald have not passed away yet, and Mark were to call you, let's get for the if Mark sounds like you in the audience, or you're Mark in the audience, if you're Mark,
I'm sure you're nicer than that.
Yeah, well, again, if you think you might be in that role and you're not aware of what a fiduciary responsibility is, and you're thinking of taking on the role, what advice would you give to a Mark?
Well, let's start with my book, Ethics for Trustees 2.0. It's a little red book that we have on display here. Because you may not understand your ethical liability, your ethical duties. You might not like some of the other people that are involved in your parents' estate. You might not like the fact that they didn't give you anything, but they gave their money to other people. But you would still have a fiduciary duty to carry out their wishes. And this is so important. It's so important that each of us understands that it's our wishes that matter, and we want those wishes carried out. You know, our love is an extension of who we are, and the people we love need to receive some final message, some final consideration as we exit this life. And I feel so badly for all three, Mark, Susan, and Rachel. Mark and Susan, because they felt like they had to get it all. They had to have it right now. Did Susan collude with Mark? Did anybody ask Susan, oh, is there anybody else related? I mean, who asked that question, right? You present yourselves as the only two children of this couple. Nobody's going to ask if there's another child. It wouldn't be logical. And even though the probate thing is a public thing, who reads the probate notices in the newspaper? Because that's where they get published. Yeah. I mean, what's a newspaper, right? I still get the newspaper, you guys. I still get it. But I just want to point out that we're in a system, but the system is not automatic. The system doesn't do anything for you that you don't set into motion by actually setting down your intentions and getting your documents done.
So to wrap up the Edna and Gerald story, Marguerite, what's your pearls of wisdom for this?
Okay, I can only give you this as an example, all right? I married my sweet husband on a Saturday. He is really sweet, and he's really cute too. It was so hot, right? Ron was there. It was 108 degrees that day. It was beautiful day in California, but it was really hot. So we had actually seen the estate planning attorney weeks before the wedding itself. And we had planned a honeymoon. We had planned a lot of things. And by the way, if you can plan a vacation, you can get an estate plan done. If you can plan a wedding, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear that you don't have time or you don't know what to do. Because if you can plan a wedding and seat all those people and make sure that Aunt Myrtle is nowhere near Aunt Jackie, you can get an estate plan done. Okay. And what we did was we got married on a Saturday, and then we actually met the attorney on Monday, and we signed our documents. So I know it's possible. And I need you to think about it this way. Marriage is the business of romance. If you're going to be in a business partnership with another person, you need to be able to talk about money. You need to be able to talk about health, and you need to be able to talk about death. Otherwise, why get married at all?
So if you're Susan, Mark, Rachel, Edna, or Gerald, subscribe to Plan for This to avoid what really is now going to make some attorneys pretty wealthy. God love them, because there's going to probably be a legal law. There's a lawsuit coming. And
there may not have been very much left. I mean, what if Gerald and Edna only had their house left, right? And they may have only had their pensions and their Social Security checks. So we're not talking about being wealthy here. We're not talking about having so much money that you don't have to worry about. That's not it. Every single person needs an estate plan, because every one of us could end up in this situation. And I hope Rachel gets her share.
I hope so too. Thank you, Marguerite.
Thanks, Ron. Meryl Streep, will you be ready when life asks, did you plan for this? Independent Trustee Alliance is a proud nonprofit sponsor of Plan for This. If you are considering serving as a trustee, please visit trusteealliance.com to learn more about this complex and sometimes overwhelming job. trusteealliance.com. Plan for This thanks the Estate Sale Warehouse for all their amazing service and support. entire home cleanouts, inventory, appraisal, auctions, sale of fine art and classic cars. Learn more at statesalewarehouse.com.
Money management and legacy. Will you be ready for life?